Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Acelith Design Endurance Championship for 2020. Today marks round 4 of season 6, and we're at Interlagos, Brazil, for what marks the end of the first half of the season, with it being 8 races, and what a cracker of a race we have today. I'm your host as always, Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and focusing on our drivers here, the Tier 1 guys, the premier division of the Acelith Design Endurance Championship, sponsored of course by Acelith Design, with their absolutely brilliant covers for steering wheels, whether they're Logitech, Thrustmaster or not, or Fanatec being the third brand. You can find a fantastic an absolutely dazzling cover for your steering wheels when doing sim racing. A number of our drivers are doing it, and our drivers will be motivated to push harder and harder on their own sim gear at this wonderful track. A track which is known to be one which has crowned a number of champions in motorsport in the past, particularly Formula 1, with it being the place where we saw Lewis Hamilton lose out on a potential championship win in his inaugural year in Formula 1, only to come back a year later and secure the win with the legendary "Is That Glock" moment and pick up his first championship win for McLaren. Since then, Interlagos has taken a little bit of a back step compared to other circuits, albeit we did see Jenson Button win his Formula 1 championship for Brawn GP in 2009. But then again, here, whilst we're not at the end of the championship or not close enough for it to be a decider within Tier 1, there's definitely a lot of points up for grabs today, and our drivers are going to be wanting to clutch as many points as possible. Right, back to normal. There we go, technical team managed to get fixed. So, what is the pace looking like at the moment? Well, in that time, we have seen that G-Rabbit has been able to set a 123.4, but I get the feeling that Bottlejob has probably just been in the pits or something. No, my apologies, he has not been in the pits. That is a one... If we can get the timing screens up. No, we're still not having any luck with being able to see the lap times. Okay. So far, the fastest lap appears to be a 123.4, with Mr. Sean hanging on by a significant distance. That does not add up very well. Okay, so it looks as though the timings have been reset. So we're going to have to wait for our drivers to come around and do a couple more laps before we actually get an indication, because at the moment everything is out of sync on our screens. Okay, and we've got Jagannat coming through with 123.5. So Jagannat improving by 2 seconds over his previous lap. So he did have a very bad lap. We're just going to stay with Senna for a bit. With Senna really pushing it there through turn 4, going for the full track limits, if you will. If you go over that exit curve from turn 4 and put all 4 wheels off of and beyond that curve, you're picking up a half-second penalty as a minimum, and you have to be very careful with that exit curve out of turn 4 because it's down slope, if you will. So you can imagine once 2 wheels go onto that curve, the rest of the car is being pulled downhill, and if a car's got a very low ride height, it will actually cause the car to bottom out on that curve, and it can lead to you having a major accident. But Senna here, getting it all sorts of sideways, and he's had to abort the lap coming out of turn 10. Definitely something that can happen. Experienced it myself in FIA in 2020. Got it all sorts of wrong on the final couple of laps at Interlagos. Turn 10 is one of those corners which is deceptively narrow, and drivers are encouraged to get on the throttle sooner than later because they feel as though they're losing time. But in doing so, you can have the mistake that Senna had, where you just simply light the rear end up too quickly and end up saying hello to the grass. And Senna's going to come through here in order to pit. And we're just going to hop away from Senna briefly and see what other drivers. We've got Rice going around at the moment. Now Rice coming into turn 12 here to effectively begin to complete the lap. And we'll wait and see what Rice is able to do lap time wise with half of qualifying remaining. As Jagannat sets a 123.2. And Rice is going to come across the line with a... not an improvement. Okay, so he hasn't had the best of laps. So far, our pole sitter, our provisional pole sitter, is Zephyx's Jack, well, 122.9. So the lap time's now seemingly coming through and a bit more clearer. So a 122.9 for Zephyx's Jack, followed 3 tenths down, as there's a bit of lag down. I think Jagannat's pulled back to the pits, but Jagannat's on a 123.2. Then we've got G-Rabbit coming across the line, not to improve, but he's currently sitting on what is a 123.3. And we've got Automatics getting out of the way of another driver who was just coming through. I think that was not Gadget, that was another driver, but we can see that Automatics at the moment in P4 is sitting on what is a 123.5, and then Senna in the pits at the moment with a 123.7. And then we've got Gadget, who is coming around to complete a lap, but actually coming into pit. So he's sitting currently on a 123.8. Then we've got Sean sitting on a 123.8 approximately as well. So it's very close between our drivers at the moment. In that midfield again, we do have a car that's running away. Jack is running away. And Sean's going to come around to complete the lap, not pulling over to the left, staying to the right. Now this is very interesting. A lot of our drivers not seeming to be able to nail their laps at the moment. Perhaps just having a bit of difficulty here. Perhaps with the pressure being on a little bit, they're just feeling it. As Plucks the Duck has now gone fastest, albeit we didn't get that on our timing sheet. Well, 122.7, a ferocious lap by Plucks there, and really now up in the ante for Jack and Jaganat to respond. And really it's those three who seem to be running away with the qualifying laps at this time in the battle for provisional pole and eventually pole position, or even just being on that front row, which is going to be critical in the run down to turn 1 at this circuit, because it's a heavy braking zone after an initial moderate acceleration zone. Now he's coming out of the corners there, but we're going to switch away from Plucks at this point just briefly and see whether Jack is able to respond. Jack being on a flyer of a lap right now by the looks of things, and you can see just how much of the limits he's using there, going up into what is turn number 8 and now through into 9. And I think Jack is really on the ball here, skidding it sideways into 8 and now coming up into 10. Now will he use the full apex here? Yes, he will do it, and you can see how planty he is getting on the throttle. Now coming into 11, he's going to use a tiny bit of curve to rotate the car, but it's a very raised curve, and you can see how nicely he's able to take out the corner into 12. Perhaps he could have used a little bit more of the limits on entry there, but you can see he's using maximum limits on exit of 12, and now he's just got the long run, and he's not quite going to be in that distant tow of what is Muller CJ's car up in the runs of start finish straight, but he's going to be on the left hand side, and I think, no, he's pulling over to the right, so he doesn't feel as though he's perhaps improved. And Zefix's Jack has improved by a tenth, not enough to secure the provisional pole, but that actually is a good response to Plucks. And Jack may be wondering to himself right now, what if I pulled over to the left hand side? Would it have got me even closer and given me more security to help lock out the front row alongside Plucks? Because I get the feeling that's what Jack may be trying to do here. Perhaps just being on that front row will give him the battle into turn 1 against Plucks, and if he can stay with Plucks for a couple of laps, then you never know what could happen as pressure starts to build up. G-Rabbit coming across there, not improving, but he's in P4 at the moment. A very respectable lap by the Lexus driver, and the Finn really starting to show the smarts in terms of pace. And then we've got Alex currently sitting in P5 still, no improvement. Senna up into P6 at this point, and Gadget in P7, very close in terms of lap time, as Jaganat has improved to a 123.2. Now there is one driver who we did see set an absolute banger of a lap earlier, but I'm not sure what's happened to it. It seems to have disappeared, and that is Bottle Job. Now on our timing screens, we're being told that he has set himself a 124.2, but I'm very doubtful that's accurate, because I swear we saw him do a 123.4 or 123.5. So unless there's been a glitch or something, I get the feeling that the grid we're seeing on our timing sheets is not 100% accurate here. Still, we'll find out as time progresses, but for now we're going to stay with Bottle Job and just see him do this lap, and we're going to switch to the onboard at this point and bring up the data for you. You can see he goes a little wide of apex into 6, but then nails it into 7, under braking now, heavy under the braking into turn 8. Perhaps not getting as smooth a run into 8 as perhaps he wanted there. You could see how the car sort of juddered into 8 upon entry, but he's been able to nail it well into 10 by looks of things here, turning tight to that apex here and not going down to first gear, interesting enough, avoiding over driving the car effectively and keeping the torque down to a little bit. Now coming into 12 here, is he going to get a really nice run, clipping that inner apex there, and then getting out onto that outer curve, and now charging up the hill towards the start-finish straight here, staying really close to the left-hand side here. I think Bottle thinks he's on a better lap, and we'll have to wait and find out. He's going to be staying to that left-hand side by the looks of things, cutting as much to the left, and the lap is a 123.0, so Bottle definitely had a lot in the tank, a lot in the bottle, shall we say, and that puts him in provisional P3. Well done, that man. Now right in the fight effectively for, not perhaps provisional pole, but definitely for the second row of the grid, and Bottle showing the mettle that he's got in the Group 2 category. Will Jagannath respond? That is the big question with 2 minutes remaining. And Alex as well could respond with G-Rabbit not far in between the pair of them as he pops into the pits. And Plucks the Duck has set a 1:22.4. That is an absolutely ferocious lap. That has shattered expectations. That must have been the perfect lap in Plucks' mind there. And we can see that Zephyx's Jack has improved slightly to a 1:22.8. And that's moved him a little bit further away from Bottle Job, putting the gap to practically 2 tenths at this point. But at the same time, one has to imagine here whether Jack is starting to cool it down, thinking, well, I can't match Plucks for overall lap time in qualifying, but in return, when it comes to the race, we'll find out. We'll have to wait and see with 1.5 minutes to qualifying to end. And as we see Jack coming through here, have we got any other drivers out on track who are on a hot lap at the moment? As Berkey Baby's getting out of the way of everyone here. And we're just going to stay with Awesome Alex for a little bit, waiting for the response from Awesome Alex at this point, because he has had a bit of a quiet session in qualifying after his initial lap. Or initial lap, we should say. Taking a bit of a different line there, you'll notice, coming out of 8 into 9, taking a much tighter line to 9 compared to other drivers who like to swing the car in almost onto the grass there for turn 10. But Alex just keeping it within limits. That's a very tempting thing to do. You can go very wide into 10, but go too wide, of course, and the grass will snap you up. And now coming out of 11, full throttle, now down into 12, braking heavily here, and we'll have to wait and see as he gets a little bit of snap oversteer upon the power coming out of 12, but it's all good by looks of things. Alex has got it stabilised. That NSX's rear end really just not responding too kindly to the power there for him, but still this looks like an improvement to an extent, although he's going to actually stay over to the right here with 20 seconds to go. Not an improvement, in fact. And now come around again. Now let's take a look through who's going to be the first to finish their qualifying lap, if you will, as we can see that both Sean and Rice have pitted, so they are not doing qualifying anymore after this. Okay, Flapjack's just come across the line, as has Berkey Baby. So I think the first of our drivers to finish qualifying will be, in terms of their final laps, it will be G-Rabbit. So let's see how the Finn does as he comes around to complete his lap. Does he improve on his current P6 time? No, he jumps to the pits instead. And then we have got Bottle Job, followed very closely by Muller CJ, if you will. Now, Bottle Job, I think, is not coming into the pits. We're going to hop to Muller CJ because he's the one who could potentially improve even more. No improvement for Muller CJ as he comes to the end of his qualifying lap. Now, who else have we got running around at this time? Got Flapjack running around here. And we've got Plucks the next to come across the line now. Is Plucks going to try and absolutely shatter that 1:22.4 and shatter all expectations even further? Honestly, if he is, we'll have to wait and find out. And he comes across the line with not an improvement. And then we've got Jack coming across the line here. Will he improve? Doesn't improve. So that is pole position so far for Plucks. Can anyone beat the pair of them to that front row? I must admit, I'm a bit doubtful with 30 seconds to go, but we've got Berkey Baby coming around now. In fact, we've got a driver ahead of Berkey Baby coming through. That is Awesome Alex, although I think Awesome Alex is actually, yep, he is off of a lap. So we will wait and find out and see if Berkey Baby improves. He comes across the line here. No improvement. And then we've got Jagannath coming across the line. Does not improve. So Plucks lined up on the left-hand side, Jack on the right-hand side. Jack, of course, having the inside into turn 1 and therefore could have authority over the entry line. But they're going to have to go side by side into there, and it's all about who can get the best possible launch down into turn 1. And it's lights out and away they go. And you can see immediately Jagannath in the 08 GTR having an absolutely ferocious start. Not in a worry about that turbo. And as they go down into turn 1 here, Plucks has managed to hold on to his position. Meanwhile, Bottle Job has pulled up into P3 away from the rest of the field, if you will, having started in P3. All of our drivers seemingly making it through okay. And Jack is really the one who has not benefited from the start, having fallen down to 5th. But you can see they're all charging down towards turn 4 for the first time of asking. And there's going to be some side-by-side action here, as you can see see that Jaggernaut has in the battle with Awesome Alex. Alex has got ahead, but Jack has had to go to the outside and essentially take evasive action going into turn 4. But all of our drivers are making it through relatively unscathed, but there will be some half-second penalties that our drivers will be planted with for going wide out of turn 4 and into 5, if you will. But they can burn that off quite quickly, as there's still an absolute ton of side-by-side action, and we can see that Bottlejob has actually made his way up into P2, and we'll have to take a look back at that shortly, as we've got DJ Rice and Zephyx's Jack going side-by-side through 9, but Jack is able to hold ahead into 10, and now coming into turn 10, we've got all of our drivers starting to settle down and find their rhythm, albeit Senna's not having the best of run here, and you can see that behind him G-Rabbit is feeling quite ferocious in the Lexus this early on, battling another Lexus driver, trying to take a peek at the inside into 12, but not able to make anything happen at this point. He's just going to settle in, and really, as they all come out of 12 and now onto that start-finish straight, with one lap completed, it is Plucks the Duck leading 1.6 seconds ahead of Sir Bottlejob, who's 1.1 seconds ahead of Awesome Alex, who's battling with Jaggernaut, who's battling with Jack, and they're coming down into turn 1, and Jack is on the inside, using the pace advantage of the slipstream to make the move stick. By looks of fingers, Jaggernaut falls down to 5th, followed closely by Rice, then Berkey Baby for 7th, and then you've got Ayrton Senna in 8th, then G-Rabbit in 9th, who's got past, in fact, no, he hasn't got past, my apologies, and then you've got Gadget in 10th, followed by Flapjack in 11th, then Muller CJ in 12th, then Mr. Sean in 13th, bringing up the rear of the field at this point in time. So all of our drivers have had a successful first lap, but let's take a quick look back at Sir Bottlejob's pass up the field, if we can, and in fact, it looks as though our replay cameras are glitched, folks, so we're not going to even be able to see that. That's very unfortunate. Now, our replay cameras are fully glitched out, so we're not going to have any replays here, but let's try and look down the field. As we can see, continue battling, coming down into turn 8 for Awesome Alex and Jack. They're trading places back and forth, these two drivers. And it really does seem as though the NSX and the GTR are evenly matched through this second section, or indeed over the course of the lap, as Jack gets back in front, taking the inside line with a little lunge into turn number 10, but now coming out of 10, down into 11, and then finally into 12, we can see that things have settled a bit, but Rice taking a peek on Berkey Baby and really trying to intimidate Berkey Baby into a mistake perhaps, or giving him the room where he doesn't need to, given that Berkey Baby has the authority. But all of our drivers coming through here, and I think a move could be on. What is Senna charging up the back of Rice at this point, but don't rule out the Finn behind Senna, i.e. the Lexus driver of G-Rabbit, as all three of them are now coming up into turn 1, and it looks like Rice is taking that defensive line to the inside, but in return, as they've come through 1, you can see that Senna is going side by side with Rice, and there's contact there, and there was even more contact between G-Rabbit, and unfortunately, there could be a little bit of damage, as all three drivers, in fact, have managed to regain their positions, albeit G-Rabbit is inherited all those positions, Gadget is inherited too, and Senna is now fighting with Gadget down into turn 4, taking that inside line, and I think in Gadget there was contact between the two of them. That is very unfortunate for Gadget, because he was quite an opportunist there and making up some progress, but it looks as though it's in tatters for Gadget this early on in the race. Only 4 minutes past, but of course there's 56 minutes to go, so it's not as though Gadget is out of the woods yet, and there could still be plenty of action and plenty of incidents as we go deeper and deeper into the race. But I get the feeling that Gadget may feel a little bit aggrieved with that one, and there might be a steward calling after the race already. But then focusing, in fact, looking further back, it looks as though one of the NSXs there got it all sorts of wrong coming into one of the corners. And coming out of turn 8, if you will, and we're just following the rear guys here, and I think that was Flapjack just getting a little bit sideways on the power out of 8, being chased heavily by Miller CJ here. But the little pack starting to form up a little bit in terms of line formation rather than all side by side. Although will Muller have the run here as they come up through turn number 13, and now they're charging up towards 14 and 15 and completing the lap. Now the question's got to be, will Muller feel confident? And you can see Flapjack is already going defensive here. He knows that Muller's going to have a strong run into turn 1, braking as late as possible as he goes to the outside, and Flapjack defends well, but Muller just goes round the outside. A fantastic move by Muller, a classic round the outside into turn 1, using the strength of the brakes on that Lexus and the confidence he has in those tyres to just really put it round the outside of Flapjack. And now Mr. Sean behind them, the pair of them might be looking to make an opportunistic move in the future, but you've got to keep in mind that Flapjack is not going to give up the fight here, and he's going to try and contest it. Now further up the field, we have got Plucks the Duck, who's 1.8 seconds ahead of Bottlejob, and Jack, it looks as though, has finally broken a little bit of a gap to Awesome Alex behind in P4. So it seems as though our top 3, if you will, have settled down a little bit, but then again, do not count out the fact that really we have got 6 cars all within 6 seconds of one another, so the top 6 within 6 seconds of one another. So all these drivers at the moment forming the lead pack, and then we effectively have the chasing pack from P7 down to P11, and then we have our drivers who have essentially not had the best of runs due to incidents so far, and that will be Gadget, and also in last but not least at the moment G-Rabbit down in P13. And we're not sure what happened to G-Rabbit there. Perhaps there was contact, perhaps there was a bit of an incident. In fact, he's already gone to a set of mediums, so it looks like he may have had to have pit for damage, and he's used that to switch to mediums, and now he's going to extend into a very long stint. Now, if you're wondering about the tyres here, folks, in terms of the times, as we just look back through the field to see what's happening, and you can see some action already happening further back, as it looks as though Muller CJ has been passed by DJ Rice. Rice going very deep on the brakes there and getting it sideways into turn 1. But in return, I think Muller now is going to charge after Rice here. He's going to feel as though he's got the momentum coming out of 2-3 and now down in the run to 4. And in return, I think you could see a return battle going into 4 where Muller's and immediately pulling over to the left-hand side. But it doesn't look as though he had enough momentum to go for that move there. And really, it was just to try and intimidate Rice in terms of making him think that a move was on and potentially force Rice into an error. But it hasn't worked out this time. As you can see, Sean as well is right up the backside now of one Flapjack in the Lexus versus the Honda in front of him, and I think Flapjack is just struggling at this point. Oh goodness me. Now, was there contact between the two drivers there? I don't think so. I think Sean just had to really back out of that at the last moment. There might have been a little bit of a grazing touch, but not enough for either driver to pick up damage perhaps. From Flapjack's perspective, it looks as though he might have been sent for a little bit. We've just got on the throttle there, but Flapjack's really not having a good time right now, and we're going to look further up the field because I think we've got two drivers who are getting closer and closer, and in fact there has been a trade of position between Bottlejob and Jack. Now, we can't see what happened there, but there's definitely been an exchange of places. Oh, goodness me. And Awesome Alex has left the race. It looks as though the team have called him in to retire the car. That is very unfortunate. Only 7 minutes into the race, but Alex has had some major issues by the looks of things, and he didn't look comfortable out there, perhaps, as we would have thought he was. He was looking comfortable, we should say, but perhaps there was something underlying with the car, because we haven't seen what's happened to him recently, but he's dropped out, and Jack being up into P2. Now, one does have to wonder whether perhaps there was a little bit of an incident that did involve Alex, but again, we'll have to find that out after the race because we haven't been able to see it. Now, looking at, as the gap starts to open up a little bit here, almost to 8 tenths between Jack and Bottlejob, we can see that Jaganat's in P4, and that's promoted Berkey into P5 with Alex retiring the car, and Senna now in P6, and all our drivers really being promoted one outside of the top 3, and leading the chasing pack is Senna in P6 as he goes sideways under braking into turn 8 in his Lexus, and that means Muller is going to really be able to gain on the back of Senna. And Rice is chasing after the pair of them as well, albeit I think Rice is feeling a little bit of a need to settle down now because he's had a bit of an active opening couple of laps, but now he just needs to cool it down, and we can see that the battle for P9 between Flapjack and Sean is still ongoing, and it's enabling Gadget to gradually close up. And if this continues, you can imagine that Rice is thinking to himself right now, right, well, I've got an opportunity here. I've got drivers in front of me who are chasing after one another close. I've got drivers behind me who are battling one another. So I can actually use this as a bit of a fuel-saving moment and calm the car down a bit. But then again, I think Sean's calmed it down in terms of attacking at this point. And we can see that our drivers are spacing out a little bit. And Sean's not really close enough to go for the move into turn 1 here. I think he's just simply sizing up Flapjack once again and thinking, right, when Flapjack's ready to make a mistake, I'm going to be ready to pounce. And in terms of pit stops, Gadget is just coming out of the pits now, having gone for his initial pit stop, albeit he's changed to the Super Softs, but not taking on any fuel. And you can imagine with the fuel here and the tyres, with the Super Soft tyres, drivers are going to be pitting roughly every 8 to 12 laps, and we are only 7 laps in at this point. Well, we're on to our 7th lap, we should say. So Gadget to be switching to a new set of tyres after 6 laps. That's a little bit lower than perhaps our predictions would forecast. But the thing with the cars here, once the tyres start to go off, the lap times really do start to come down. Particularly in sectors 2 and 3, where you need that tyre grip in order to get the best possible lap time. Particularly coming out of turn 11, where on fresh tyres, you can take turn 11 flat out. As Flapjack's got it all sorts of wrong coming out of turn 9 there. And up into 10, it looks though Sean's gone to the inside, and now he just needs to defend the inside going for 11 and then make sure Flapjack doesn't get the cut into 12, albeit Flapjack is running a lot of momentum, but you can see how he was too close to the back of Sean there and had to back out of it a little bit, as our leaders are now coming in after 7 laps. Now that's quite an early pit stop perhaps compared to what some of our drivers may be planning to do, but it does mean that our leader at this point in time, once our drivers start coming out of the pits, will be Berkey Baby for the time being, although we'll have to see how they all come out. In fact, it won't be Berkey Baby because all of a sudden our leaders are coming out already onto the straights. That's our timing screens. And looking further down the field here, We can see that there's a whole clattering of pit stops coming in, but not everybody's pitting at this point, so it's going to mix it up. But really the key thing to note in terms of our leaders is that Plux the Duck, Jack and Sir Bottlejob have all come out ahead of Berkey Baby, who has gone longer on the first stint. And meanwhile, Jaggernaut, who did pit by looks of it, no, he hasn't pitted actually, no, in fact he has pitted. Yeah, he has pitted, and Jaggernaut, through pitting, has brought himself out behind Berkey Baby, who could potentially be costing him a significant amount of time. And Jaggernaut's the one who's going to fall by the wayside a little bit if he cannot get past Berkey soon, because through Sector 2 in particular, you can see already just how much Berkey is holding Jaggernaut up because of the fact that Berkey's got those dirtier tyres, they're more worn as well, and they're just not in the fresh position at the moment in order to give him optimum pace. And he's going to feel that so much coming down into turn 12 here, as when he gets on the brakes, will he go for a quick swing up the inside? No, he won't into 12, so he's going to try and use the momentum of Berkey. Alternatively, Berkey gets it very wrong coming out of 12 there, and Jaggernaut had to stay to the inside and lift out of it perhaps just to give Berkey the room. But good respect shown between the two drivers, but the Frenchman has lost out in the chase for the win, and you can see Berkey is now into the pits. And behind him, will anybody else come? As I think that is Muller CJ going for a very extended run. Yet Muller CJ going even deeper, 9 laps on a set of super softs. And then Senna coming through at the moment. And we'll have to wait and see how it plays out when he comes around onto the first of our long straights in the lap, so coming down towards turn 4. But we can see that Muller really is the one to watch out for here in terms of being on that offset strategy, as Senna and Berkey Baby come out side by side. But it looks as though Senna's just got enough momentum, given that he hasn't pitted at the same time as Berkey. In fact, he pitted 1 lap earlier, and that has cost Berkey a position. Now Berkey's probably going to feel a little bit frustrated and know that he's going to need to use some momentum to get past Senna here, where the fact that his tyres are going to be absolutely raw fresh, whereas Senna's tyres are going to be starting to feel a little bit aware, albeit they're still going to be in a nice place. But it has been a bit of a mix-up in terms of the pit stops so far, and really the one driver at the moment who we've got to watch out for in terms of how the pit stops play out, given he took a much earlier pit stop after an incident earlier in the race, would be Gadget, where we can find Gadget, who is currently running in P10 and battling with the other drivers here, particularly Mr. Sean, who he's in front of at the moment. Gadget having pitted on lap number 6. And as he's coming through here, chasing after Flapjack, and you can see already, based on the data we've got available, that his tyres are showing the wear compared to Mr. Sean's tyres, which are absolutely fresh after a single lap. And that will be the difference in terms of that offset of the pit strategies, if you want. I think Gadget here is trying to play a different game in order to get past other drivers, just simply by having pitted early and try to take away the disadvantage he got from the incident. But all 3 of our drivers now, Flapjack, Gadget and Sean, all charging up towards turn 1. Will there be a move from Sean this time out? No, he's just biding his time and holding in behind Gadget, perhaps waiting for Gadget's tyres to experience just 1 or 2 more laps of wear, and that will hopefully put him in a position to strike. But all of our pit stops now, the first round of pit stops, have concluded, if you will. And the one driver really who you've got to feel for at the moment, running in last, is G Rabbit, the Finnish driver, having had a rather poor start. Well, an adventurous start, we should say, to begin with. But then it seemed there was an incident which just set him all the way to the back. The damage plus the fact that he's gone for a pit stop where he's put on the medium tyres. So he's running off pace at the moment. And it just doesn't look as though it's going to be the Finns' day right now. But never say never, because remember, those medium tyres are going to go deeper into the race, so long as he does not cook them hard under braking. But looking further afield then, we can see that a train is starting to form in the battle for P5. And in fact, Berkey Baby has got past Senna. Now Senna, yep, he has pitted. Has Muller pitted? That is the question. Yep, Muller's only recently pitted. So that's how it's all played out, if you will. And Berkey's got past Senna. And in return, Muller, through the pit stops, has come out into this gaggle of cars and really is back in the mix. And that's where Muller wanted to be, based on his track position when the pit stops occurred. He wanted to be coming out in the fight for 5th, and he's got what he wanted. And Rice, do not count out Rice 83, as he's only what is 1.3 seconds down the road from these guys at this point in time, as we've got some blue flags out at the moment. That doesn't sound at all right. Perhaps that's a bit of an error by some of our flag marshals, but nonetheless, perhaps our flag marshals are looking at the wrong cars today and been given the wrong orders from race control. Ignoring that, we can see that really Muller is on the charge right now to try and get past Senna coming down into turn 4, but the two cars are matched, what of them being both Lexus 16s, so they're not going to be feeling relative strengths between the cars, but the drivers drivers will be sizing one another up, and you can see how Muller was much cleaner there coming through 4 and into 5 compared to Senna, and Senna really had to be cautious not to overextend the curve out of 4, and that's cost him quite a bit of momentum. But in return, that dirty air through what is 6, 7 and up into 8 is going to affect Muller, but Muller does not seem to be perturbed by it, and look how close he's running to the back of Senna through 8 now into 9 and into 10, forming up a bit of a traffic jam. And speaking of traffic jams, it looks as though Flapjack is still feeling that pressure from Gadget, and Sean behind Gadget as well. Little bit of a gaggle coming up there. But then flipping back to our battle for P6 at this point in time, we can see that Senna is gradually falling away from Berkey Baby. I think Berkey is feeling quite comfortable in the GTR, whereas Senna's just feeling a little bit of pressure, going sideways under braking into 12 there. You could just see the rear end drifting in, and Muller looks much more controlled and stable at this point. And it could be the brake balances that they're running as well. Perhaps Senna's running a brake balance, which just opens up the rear end of the car a little bit more, so brake bias towards the rear. Alternatively, what he's trying to do is essentially trail brake the car in such a manner as to get the rear to slide, if you will. It's something you can do in these cars. And Senna is feeling that pressure, but he's holding on for the time being as he goes a bit deep through 1. Now looking further down the field, we can see that Flapjack is still under attack by Gadget. Gadget really going for this move for P9 right now as we switch to the onboard of Gadget's car here. And I think he may potentially have a run, although he's got to keep an eye on his wind mirrors here for the fact that he's got Mr. Sean chasing after, but Sean is not close enough to pounce, whereas Gadget looks like he's going to try and pounce around the inside initially, but perhaps go for the cut back under braking. Not able to get it done there. Seemed a bit heavy on the brakes going into turn 4, and that meant he couldn't use the cutback manoeuvre to try and get past Flapjack, but he's really up the backside of Flapjack's car at the moment. The two NSX drivers are being equally matched here, and Sean meanwhile just biding his time. Perhaps he's doing a little bit of fuel saving behind these two, thinking to himself, you know what, really, I'm not in the fight for the upper echelons of the field, but I can use this situation to just save fuel because these guys are running a good pace. As we can see, Sean getting a much better run out of turn 9 by comparison with Gadget, but in return I think Gadget's being compromised by running so close towards Flapjack, and you can see that here in the fact that Gadget has had to take such a tight exit line out of turn 10, and it's cost him a good amount of momentum initially, and he's gone heavy on the brakes into 12, and Sean is all over the back of Gadget, and this is just going to keep clustering up here, and you do have to wonder how long it's going to be before Sean tries to go for a move, because perhaps the cork in the bottle is Gadget for him, and really wants Gadget out the way. And also you've got to keep in mind that Gadget is on much older tyres by comparison with these guys as they're coming up into the corner there into turn 1, and you can imagine that Flapjack defends into the inside as we switch camera, and he's still holding on, and he's really holding up Gadget's game plan here, because Sean is all over the back of Gadget. This is an absolute difficult one for Sean and Gadget. And further up the field here in the battle for P6, you can see as Rice almost goes flying off there, Senna has lost the place under an overtake into turn 4, or in the run down to turn 4, and Muller CJ has been promoted to 6th, and Senna is now having to defend against Rice, and that is going to be a difficult one for Senna because I think he's lost a lot of momentum, and Rice has decided right now it's time for me to pounce. I'm going to take this one off your Senna as well. And further down the field, Flapjack is still holding on against Gadget. We will take a look back at that in the near future, but for now let's stay with our runners for P7, and we can see that Rice is being smart in terms of where he's positioning his car. He's trying to avoid running too close to Senna through sector 2 because he knows that the dirty air is only going to compromise his exit lines and his ability to get on the throttle. But watch here, if he gets it right through 12, which I suspect he's trying to do, he's going for that gentle line through 12, which will cost him some initial momentum, but he knows he's got the legs in the run after Senna down into turn 1, albeit he's very far back this time, just within the slipstream zone, and I think that means that he's not going to be anywhere near. But remember, Senna does not have the slipstream at all anymore, so Senna is going to be using all the fuel he's got, and perhaps Rice is also thinking about doing a little bit of fuel saving. And taking a look further back here, Gadget has come into the pits now, which releases both Flapjack in terms of pressure and Sean in terms of being able to apply pressure, and that means Gadget is now going to be coming out behind these two, and he's going to be a few seconds down the field. A pit stop for just tyres here, costing in the region of about 8 to 10 seconds from our estimates on the timing boards. And that means that Gadget now has got to wonder about, okay, taking another pit stop at this point, and he's made those tyres last 8 laps, which we get the feeling he's going to try and make the tyres last 8 laps again from this point onwards. Will the offset strategy be something he can use to essentially get round these two and get into the fight for P8 upwards? Now, speaking of P8, of course, Rice here falling back a little bit from Senna, and in return it's spacing out to P6. And this can happen in Group 2. You can get the little bit of spacing out between the cars, what the dirty air. Berkey Baby having fallen back a bit into P5 now, and really falling back into the clutches of the guys battling for P6, 7 and 8. But again, Berkey Baby does have good pace as our leaders come in for their second stop, leading with Flux the Duck. The gap only being 1.5 seconds between him and Jack. And you can see they're tied on fuel at this point. And that is something which our drivers are thinking about. And Bottle Job as well, pitting from P3. And Bottle Job coming in with just 1% less fuel than the other two drivers, or 1 litre less fuel. And you've got to really feel for these guys in terms of the fact that they're all trying to outfox one another in terms of strategy. And I think Bottle Job really does want to go for that podium here, and he'll be targeting it. And really, as Jaggernaut is running around, so Jaggernaut's gone at 1 more lap. Now Bottle's got to think about how soon he can get the tyre switched on and whether he's going to be held up by Jaggernaut, because of course if he's going to have to try and get past Jaggernaut, we suspect Jaggernaut will pit within the next lap or so. Then perhaps he can afford to hold back for 1 lap if Jaggernaut's running reasonably quickly and not have to worry too much, and then use that as a fuel saving method. Alternatively, does he push hard and try to get past Jaggernaut, who will want to hold him up effectively and compromise his ability to pull away through the pit stops? Now Jaggernaut, of course, running that 08 Nissan. Now it's going to be one of those cars that, of course, is faster on the straights here, but it's going to feel the pressure through the corners, particularly sector 2. And you can see how Bottle Job is closing up, literally leg over leg here. And it's just indicative of the fact that tyre wear and that difference in the tyres in terms of Jaggernaut's old super softs versus Bottle Job's much fresher tyres where he's running on those super softs as well. The pace difference is astronomical. But the good news for Bottle, of course, is he hasn't been held up too much by the Frenchman, and he's going to be running behind Jaggernaut as they come up towards the start-finish line. And I think if Jaggernaut pits here, then that's going to give Bottle Job a huge amount of slip. In fact, Jaggernaut is not pitting here, and in fact he's going defensive down into turn 1. Now this has probably caught Bottle Job out a little bit, and he's going to have to go for the move. And as he looks to the outside here, Jaggernaut going deep on the brakes and feeling that tyre where there's contact between the two drivers, but it definitely wasn't intentional. I think Jaggernaut just simply slid a bit on the brakes there. Now there's no damage to either driver's car at this point, but looking at that front right tyre in particular on Jaggernaut's car, you can see just how worn those tyres are. And really what he's trying to do is make this stint go as long as possible. I think he's trying to reduce the number of pit stops he's going to have to make compared to what he suspects Bottle Job had to make, as Jaggernaut just keeps it on the circuit there. I don't think that's going to be a half-second penalty, because there were 2 wheels on the exit curve out of the corner of turn 4, but Bottle Job has been able to get past as a result, and that promotes him to P3. But that has cost him a significant amount of time in the chase after the leaders here, and in fact that was approximately 2 to 2.5 seconds cost just through that one battle. And I think Bottle Job's going to be sort of miffed in a way at the fact that he was going for first, and now that's cost him the ability to chase after that. Meanwhile, further down we can see that Rice and Berkey Baby have exchanged positions here, but of course we do have to keep in mind that Berkey Baby is on fresher tyres, and that is through the pit stops, so it is all mixed up at this point. And Berkey Baby's in that situation much like Bottle Job and Jaggernaut, where he's going to want to get Rice out of the way as soon as possible, as Rice goes very wide out of 10 and has to back out of it sensibly there, avoiding getting the tyres cooked up on the grass, particularly that rear left that will just simply slingshot you off into the horizon. And Berkey Baby is through and back up into P6, and he's got to be thinking right now, when's Muller CJ going to pit? What if Muller going deep on his first stint and potentially going deep again on his second stint, the deepest of our runners so far? Now outside of all that, we note that Jaggernaut is now into the pits and going to a set of softs here. Now this is converse, because the fact he's been running on super softs so far, the majority of our drivers have been running those super softs, but with Jaggernaut now switching to softs, has he been trying to extend stints essentially in order to outdo his opponents just simply through better strategy? This is a bit of an odd one, and we'll have to wait and find out here. He's come out just behind Muller CJ. Now the difference here in terms of pace is that the soft tyre, when being driven by the same driver, is approximately 0.8 seconds slower than the super soft tyre. So the overall gain he's going to have on Muller CJ, who's on worn super softs, is not going to be astronomical, but it's going to be quite rapidly. And you can see through here going into the corner, so turn 8 in particular, that Jaggernaut is going to be feeling that annoyance now of running behind a driver on much older tyres, but he should have the pace as he goes for the sling out of turn 9 there. You could see just how committed he was on the throttle, and I get the feeling that actually caught Muller by surprise, and I think Jaggernaut may have been bricking it very slightly, and he's actually flashed his lights to say thank you to Muller for pulling immediately to left. Muller didn't want to get caught up in that fight. I think Muller recognises he's in a different fight, and it would be a waste of his time to hold up the Frenchman who is chasing down Bottle Job. But do keep in mind that because of that pit stop, Bottle Job is now 8.2 seconds up the road from Jaggernaut. Now Rice is in the battle with Ayrton Senna at this point, having been passed by Berkey Baby. One can imagine that whilst Rice is on those worn old tyres, meanwhile Senna is on fresher tyres, but of course there is an offset in their overall pit stops here, so this will release Senna for the time being, and Senna will be grateful for the slipstream boost he got going up into start finish straight into turn 1 for the 18th time of asking. But the flip side of the coin will be, of course, the fact that he may have to do additional pit stops. So we'll have to wait and see what happens between the drivers here as they're coming around for effectively the second half of the race. We're 25 minutes past and 35 to go. And further out that field, Muller is chasing after Jaguar, but I think he's just trying to stay in that slipstream zone for as long as possible to gain little bits of lap time over the guys behind him. So when he pits, he doesn't necessarily come out where he expects to. Further out the field, however, now this is interesting in the fact that we can see that Jack is starting to build a bit of pressure on Plux. Now, is Plux just simply turning the wick down a tiny bit and thinking to himself, you know what, I've got a bit of a gap to Jack. It's not a huge gap, but I can afford to turn the wick down just for 1 or 2 laps in order to conserve a little bit of fuel or just simply rest the legs a little bit. But in return, you can see how Jack is closing up very quickly here to Plux. Now, we have to wonder whether Plux is on perhaps a fuel saving strategy. Well, the pair of them are on similar fuel, so perhaps Plux is moving to a change of strategy here in order to try and simply do something in order to upset Jack's momentum, because Jack is on a charge right now for the race win, albeit there is 34 minutes remaining, so it's not as though they're out of the woods yet. They've got a very long way to go as we wait and see what happens over time. Now, coming out of the corner there, you can see that Jack went wide, and he is pushing that car so hard right now in order to be able to try and get the time on the race leader. But of course, the difficulty is going to be in the fact that running through Sector 2 now, he's going to be running in that dirty air. And on top of that, running that dirty air, he's going to have to be heavier on the brakes naturally because he's got to try and get the car stopped. And that can really put the tyre wear in the car. And that's what Jack's got to wonder now. Is it worth running in the dirty air of Plux for an extended period of time? Because it's only going to make life harder the longer he runs here. But of course, he doesn't want to fight too hard because Bottlejob, who is at the moment 12 seconds down on these guys, you can imagine if they really start to do heavy fighting, which will cost them 1 to 2 seconds a lap, then our third place man, as time currently stands in the battle with Jagannat, he could be creeping up into the battle for the lead. So as they're coming around to complete the lap then, again, I think it's going to be a rinse and repeat of the previous lap where Jack is just simply building that momentum. Now, will he potentially go for the lunge on the inside into turn 1? It's going to be quite far back if he does, but Plux will be wary of that. And I think Jack will, of course, be smart not to throw it away early on. I go for a crazy move because remember, we have got half the race still to go and it would not be worth it at this time. These guys are experts in preserving the race. In fact, all of our drivers here are experts in preserving their race, as we can see that a driver is coming down onto the run down to turn 4 now, and that will be Bottlejob. So that's the overall gap between the drivers, if you will, a sizable one. And Plux is really not able to get away from Jack here, and I think Jack is going to try and go for a move. If he can get it really synced up through 6 and 7, will he be able to go up the inside into 8 as they come charging up the hill then for the 20th time of asking? And Jack just sitting behind now for Plux. I think Plux is feeling a bit of pressure here. But we must switch away very briefly. We're going to stay with these guys a little bit longer, in fact, because there's not too much close action happening further around the field at this point in time. But this is a difficult situation for Plux because he knows he's going to have to drive the car hard to get away from Jack. But in return, every lap Jack spends behind him, the more wear he's putting it into his tyres. Jack's putting it into his tyres because of that dirty air. But this is a very unique position to be in because I think Jack's probably thinking to himself right now that he's able to achieve what he didn't manage to achieve in round 1, which was to take the fight to Plux over the whole race. And he really is doing it so far with half the race down and only 3 tenths between the two. And he's even closer this time. Now, surely he's got to be sizing up a move as Plux gets very squirrely under brake in there. You could see that rear end snapping initially. And I think Jack just managed to hold off bumping the back of the NSX. But I think that NSX in return is feeling the pressure. And I think the tyres as well may be just in a bit of a position right now where they're not feeling 100% confident. Jack just going a little bit out of the dirty air there, perhaps just to try and cut some of his momentum coming down to braking for turn 4. But this is the closest action that's happening out on the circuit right now, as we do have a driver coming out of the pits. Now, I believe that driver will be G-Rabbit, and we've also got Gadget in the pits from P9. We will keep an eye on these guys, but G-Rabbit now a lap down on a number of the drivers here, a lap down up to what is coverage by P4. So G-Rabbit really not having the best of races, but meanwhile up front we can continue to see just how much pressure Jack is applying on Plux as they're now coming up into turn 10. And Jack, whilst he's not close enough this time, you can see how tight he's running to the entry of the corner, but in return getting on that power a little bit too soon. And I think these two are now going at 100%, or at least Jack definitely is, because you can see just how quickly he's trying to get back on the throttle. But again, look how smooth our drivers are relatively as Jack goes out into the dirt a little bit there, and I think that momentum is being culled just a small bit at the moment. and I think Plux has done enough so far as he comes into the pits and Jack follows him. Now further down the field, Bottle Job is 8 seconds ahead of Jaggernaut, who in return is 5.8 seconds ahead of Berkey, and really the closest drivers out on track right now outside of our two leaders would be Muller CJ. Not really. No, there's not too much close proximity between Muller and Berkey Bay at this time. 2 seconds between the two drivers. The closest would happen to be Rice, who's 2 seconds down on Senna. And then okay, here we go. We've got Mr. Sean and Gadget close together. Remember, Gadget's only recently pitted, whereas Sean, I do not think has pitted that recently. And it would seem as though, because of the offset of strategies, as Gadget is going to the outside here, going on to the start-finish straight for turn 1 for the 22nd time of asking, and Sean is defending that hard. You can see just how hard he's defending to the inside, making sure to only give Gadget the space he's allowed, rather than having to give him even more space. And I think Gadget's going to have to come and find an alternative here in order to try and get past. And just looking further up the field here, we can see that Plux and Jack are still fighting, but Jack has picked up a half-second penalty for running wide, so we're probably out of turn 4, and that means that he is going to have to burn that at some point, and Plux is probably grateful for that, and it's going to hold him up a little bit. I hold Jack up a little bit, but he's still feeling that overall pressure from Jack, and it's relentless lap after lap. He's going to have to give from one of our drivers soon, as we look further up the field once again, and we can see that Gadget and Sean are still fighting one another. We're flicking back to our leaders for the 23rd lap as they go on to it. We can see that Plux is defending to the inside once again here, with the fact that Jack's trying to go to the outside. He's trying to get that cut back into turn 1, but Plux is positioning the car well and being able to build that momentum down into turn 2 through the center S and now into 3. And that is really what Jack's got to try and find a way doing. He's got to try and find a way of breaking Plux's momentum and having the opportunity to position the car well to defend. As you can see, Jack is trying to find all manner of positions to attack Plux, but Plux is just keeping sensible lines here as Bottle Job comes into the pit, and he's coming out of the pits very shortly, and I believe he's come back out in front of Jaggernaut. But switching back to our leaders again, Jack now trying to go around the outside through 6 into 7, now under braking into 8, and Plux defending it still and holding on just longer, and there's 28 minutes to go, and I can't imagine how long these guys are going to be able to keep this up for. One of them surely is going to give way to the other soon. It's like an unstoppable, immovable object bumping into an unstoppable force, and it looks like there might have been a bit of contact there between Jack and Plux under braking into 10, but Jack has had to back out of it, and the gap has opened up a little bit. I think there was some contact. Perhaps Jack just simply got a bit too close under braking, but again, no damage to either driver's car at this point, so it's all well and good, and they're showing each other great respect. Just looking further down the field, and we can see that Berkey Bay has got Muller CJ right up his backside here, but again, the offset of strategy is proving important there. And coming back to our leaders once more as they come down to turn 1. Once again, will there be an attempt this time by Jack round the outside? No. And will he go for the cutback again? Yes, he does. And look how Plux is planting it heavy on the brakes there. And Jack has got to find an alternative, because Plux knows what Jack is trying to do. And what Jack's got to try and think is, right, he knows what my typical moves are. Let's do something different. And in the run this time, it's only a attempt between them down into 4. Plux just giving Jack enough room there if he wanted to go down the outside and try and hold it round. But in return, it's just relentless pressure as Berkey comes into the pits, and that releases Muller CJ up into P5. And G-Rabbit now really falling down the field there. That switch to the mediums just hasn't worked out, but it's still credit to see him running around, but he getting some test data in that Group 2. For the later Group 2 race in the second half of the season, and it's always good for a driver to stay in there, because you never know, you can learn little things as you're driving around, things you never experienced. It's all good testing time. But coming through turn 10 then, Jack closer and closer, taking such a tight line. It looks as though in that GTR, he can just be so much more planted through the corners by comparison with the NSX. But in return, that NSX having that rotation on that rear end and then being able to get on the power, when it's done right, you can see, look at the gap Plux has opened up just through a small sequence of corners to complete the lap. The gap opened up to almost 8 tenths, almost out of that slipstream zone. But we must finally move away from our race leaders to focus on other drivers here, because they can't hog all the screen time. And we note that with the pit stops ongoing at the moment, Muller CJ is one of those drivers who seems to be on a bit of an offset strategy compared to Berkey at this point. Currently running in P5, Muller is having a comfortable time of it, and really his main rivals are not Jaggernaut or Sir Bottlejob, but instead it would happen to be Rice, Senna and Berkey. All of these drivers really running relatively close to one another, and we can see that Gadget is ahead of Sean, what was Sean most likely having hitted from what was P9 at the time, and indeed he has pitted, so that explains that. And then Flapjack's behind, the pair of them having pitted as well. Now up front, that gap is 8 tenths approximately at the moment, so no worries there. And our closest guys at the moment, who we should really be talking about, would happen to be Rice and Senna, and it looks as though both of the drivers here, Rice being on worn softs by comparison with Senna, who is running on relatively fresh super softs, although they've got a bit of wear of them. You can see that that gap is closing up significantly. The difference in the tyre solutions are those compounds, and Senna drifting through turn 4 there. Goodness me, that Lexus is going sideways for every corner, but I don't think Senna minds. I think he quite enjoys it and wants some more. But these are the closest two drivers out on track at the moment, other than our leaders, and I think Senna's really trying to push here in order to try and get ahead of Rice. He feels that Rice really being on the strategy offset is going to be a hindrance if Rice is able to deploy a strategy to its fullest. And of course, behind him, Berkey baby, he's feeling that pressure from Berkey, because Berkey is going to be, and he looked to the inside there, Senna, into turn 10, and we didn't really see that until the camera started to tilt through the corner, and I think that's actually disturbed Senna's momentum. Now, the thing to note there is, when you go into turn 10, the typical line, the racing line, is you go wide to take as tight as possible an apex, because you want a late apex through the corner. But what Senna went for there was essentially an early apex to try and attempt to move. But of course, what Rice has the ability to do, unless he sees Senna all the way down his inside, is essentially cut the nose off the other driver because of the racing line. And that's fortunate. Senna backed out of it, and I think that just simply perturbed him a little bit, but he's cleared of Rice now with Rice pitting, and we'll have to see how everybody comes out of the pits very shortly, with Muller CJ running down now towards turn 4, and then it is Jagannat who's come out here, and he's brought himself a nice amount of room between the guys who are fighting over P4 through to P8 at this point. So I think Jagannat will feel comfortable in the fact that he's picked the right time to pit, and he's on a fresh set of softs by comparison with Bottlejob, who, remember, is running on super softs and has pitted a lot sooner and is much lower on fuel. Now, you do have to wonder whether Jagannat also made his fuel stop there because of the fact there's such a gap between himself and Jagannat at this point in time. That gap being in the approximate region of 15 seconds. But we'll see how it plays out over the course of the race distance. Of course, Jagannat could be doing quite a bit of fuel saving as well, where there being 20 minutes to go. And we can imagine that our drivers will have to take on their fuel with 20 minutes to go if they haven't already, even with a bit of fuel saving. Further down the field, looking into what is turn number 1, we can see, well, in fact, further up the field, we should say, we can see that our leaders are separated by about 9 tenths at the moment, so trading times, and I think Plux has built a little bit of a momentum over Jack at that point, but it's good to see them running close beside one another. And Berkey baby is now on the charge here, running after Senna. Now, this is important for Berkey baby because he cannot afford to be held up behind Senna for too long, because of the fact that he's on the different strategy from Senna, who in return, when we look back from his car, you can see that he's almost out of fuel, and he's also got heavily worn super softs because of the fact that he's slightly offset from Berkey. And Berkey baby here really is chasing after the Lexus driver, and I think it's going to be when, not if, he can get past, because the Senna driver, Senna, the Lexus driver, is not having a good time on the tyres right now and is feeling quite a bit of wear in those rears. And you can see that Berkey is doing a bit of weaving behind Senna. And you have to wonder whether Berkey's essentially trying to intimidate a move, or alternatively just simply trying to get a little bit out of that dirty air in order to try and cool the tyres off, and weaving back and forth again. A little bit of an odd strategy here by Berkey, but perhaps he's just trying to play a little bit of mind games with the P6 driver at this time, trying to distract him and make a major mistake rather than trying to force a move on him. But we'll have to wait and find out as Jack comes into the pits and Plux decides to go one extra lap. Now, we would suspect that this is an attempt at an undercut, so we will keep our eyes peeled for what's happening there, as both drivers will probably go for their fuel stop as well, putting in 20% there, Jack, and we'll have to see what Plux decides to do when he comes into the pits, probably within the next lap or so. But looking at these two still for P6, we can see that Berkey is really closing here, and I get the feeling that Senna is going to be pitting soon, as a number of drivers ahead of him are now coming into the pits. Now, Jagannat don't have to worry about, but the one that they're going to have to worry about here is Muller, in the fact that as they're coming through what is the start-finish straight and then into turn 1, Muller could potentially have jumped the pair of them, and I think, in fact, this has worked out really well for Muller, in the fact that he's just coming out of the pits now. We're going to have to wait and find out, and watch to the right as they're coming out here. In fact, we'll switch over. Watch to the left as they're coming out of the corner. You should see Muller on the right hand side of your screen, and in fact it's going to be a drag race here down towards turn 4, and I think Muller just hasn't quite got it done, but that has really enabled Muller to gain a huge amount of momentum on Berkey, who's gone deep out of turn 4 but just about kept it within the limits and not picked up that half-second penalty. But Muller's approach of running those longer stints earlier in the race is really paying off, and in fact Berkey being held up in the traffic through the shorter stints is now suffering for it. But the key thing at the moment, and we will keep our eye on it for you folks from our commentary box, is Plux has just pitted with 9% fuel, so 2% less than Jack, who pitted the lap before. Now how will this play out? Plux has put some fuel in the car, but is it enough to get into the end? With 22%, I think that's going to be quite adventurous. He might have to do a little bit more fuel saving, alternatively get some extra fuel in the car. But in terms of coming out of the pits, you're going to see ahead, unfortunately for Jack at the moment, he's still got to look at the rear of a Honda NSX rather than have it look at the GTR's rear. But he's going to be absolutely hounding Plux now, because he must know that Plux has underfueled that car and he will need to take on more fuel, and he'll want to put as much pressure as possible on to make it a really uncomfortable run, as Flapjack seems to be running very slowly at the moment and letting the drivers through. I think he's backed out because of the blue flags. That would make common sense. And he's letting them race. Now, oh, goodness me. Meanwhile, for P5 right now, it's all tables and chairs at this point. And the fact that Senna is still going. He has not pitted yet. And that means that he's becoming a rolling roadblock for Berkey, who's got down the inside into turn 4. But Muller's going to be really annoyed at this. In fact, Muller's already decided to follow him through. With Senna having to cut so much momentum because of his old tyres through turn 4, it means that Muller is coming through, and Muller is knowing that he can get that P5. Berkey's going to be feeling that, and as we ride to the onboard of Muller here, what we're going to see is that in terms of those tyres right now, they're going to be approximately equal between the two drivers. And looking back from the GTR drive, in fact, he has taken rear damage. Now, was that off of Senna? Let's just quickly flick to Senna's car, and yes, there was damage. So it means that Senna has bumped into the back of Berkey, baby, at a point under braking. And in return, that means Berkey's running with some damaged aerodynamics, and Muller will want to capitalise on that as much as possible. Doesn't compromise in terms of too much time, but it will mean that the car will feel a bit less stable. And you can see that already as he's coming out of turn 12. And I think Muller here is going to have the run up the hill through 13, 14 and 15. And I think the Lexus driver in yellow knows that he can pounce, and in return Berkey is immediately cutting in behind, and I think he's going to try and use the overspeed in the GTR here to go for the return move into turn 1, but it's going to be very close here as Senna comes into the pits, having gone to 0% fuel, and there's contact between the two drivers as Berkey drifts into the corner there. Oh goodness me, and he's pulled out immediately. I think Berkey realises that he would have gained the place in a bit of an unfair manner, and he's pulled out of it, and there's not additional damage to the car, and it looks as though there's no damage to Muller's car, fortunately for the pair of them. That was a very daring attempt by Berkey, baby. Didn't quite pull it off, but great respect between the drivers. But unfortunately, now they've got G-Rabbit between them, and G-Rabbit is going to have to respect those blue flags because he's not on the same lap. But G-Rabbit's probably thinking right now, hey, a little bit of racing for me. Mind if I get involved, as he pulls off and takes the 50 board out? Oh, no, that's going to play to the minds of some of our drivers. Now, will any of our drivers be caught out by that? The fact that there's no 50 board there anymore, as it was sent away by G-Rabbit there as he tried to get out of the way of the guys racing for P5. Now, Rice is only 6 seconds down the road from Berkey, baby, and Muller CJ, but he is being hounded by by Mr. Sean here. And that is going to be important. And also keep in mind, Boljo was just pitted from P3. We're going to keep an eye on how that plays out, because remember, he was doing more stints on the super soft, but he's out of fuel now, so he's going to take his fuel stop. And I think Jagannath's just coming across the start-finish line, and that means that Boljo is going to come back out in front of Jagannath, but Jagannath will have the momentum in his favour as Rice goes quite deep, coming out of 12, and he's going to be hounded by Sean here as the pair of them go charging up the hill to complete the lap. Now, will there be a potential move as we switch to the onboard here? And Sean is building momentum, and he breaks off at the last minute. Now that is interesting, potentially trying to intimidate Rice to go a little bit longer by simply not staying out by comparison with Rice. But Rice is going to be feeling that in terms of his tyres. I'm not in the best of states right now, but he is running the softs, so they will last just that little bit longer than the super soft. But it's all coming together for the strategies right now, and we'll have to wait and see what surprises lie in store. Up the front, it's only a second between Jack and Plux, but remember, there is the fuel consideration between the two drivers, and you do have to wonder whether Jack has played a smart card in terms of the fact he took on a little bit more fuel in the pit stop by comparison with Plux, but it's all to play for between these two in the final 16 minutes. Further down the field, you can see that there is a 2-second gap in the battle for P3 between Sir Bottlejob and Jaggernaut. And I think Jaggernaut here will be thinking to himself that he's played a smart strategy. As you can see, the gap is opening by default. What with Jaggernaut being on what would be the soft tyre by comparison with Bottlejob being on the super soft tyre. Now, you do have to wonder whether Jaggernaut is going to either pit very late on those super softs and go for a qualifying stint on the super soft tyre. Alternatively, he's going to try and stay on those softs until the end of the race, whereas Bottlejob will probably have to pit one more time. We'll have to wait and find out. Muller CJ haven't cleared everyone for a little bit of time, and DJ Rice now feeling the pressure from Berkey Baby here. And do keep in mind that Berkey really is the driver who has had to suffer as a result of the incident from earlier on with Senna. And Berkey, I think, has pitted, and that would explain why he's so far down there and he's behind Rice. He's pitted and taken on fuel, and that is unfortunate for Berkey, but there's still the opportunity to get some places here. As you can see, Rice defended to the inside initially, and Berkey's gone to the outside, not considering doing a dummy perhaps and switching back to the inside at the last possible moment, and almost drifting onto the grass there in turn one. That is a horrible feeling when you start to feel the car drift under braking towards the grass on the outside of one. But you can see just how much momentum he's carrying by comparison with Rice on his fresher tyres, and I think Rice is just going to stay to the outside and say, go on Berkey, take the place, we're in a different race right now, because he's not putting up a huge fight on the inside here. And to be fair for Rice right now, he's not in this race immediately, as Rice almost runs off there of 4, but he's not going to pick up the half-second penalty because he managed to keep 2 or more tyres on that curb on the exit. Now further down, we can see that Gadget is gradually building places here, what with the offset of the strategies and the fact that Senna has come out behind him, with Senna having the contact with Berkey earlier on and really going as deep as possible on a set of tyres. And Gadget is really the surprise element here in the fact that he did drop all the way to 12th after an incident at the start after having a rather good start, but he's now creeping up the field, currently in P8, so we'll monitor his progress in the remaining 14 minutes with enthusiasm. And then further down, with Senna chasing after him, you've got Sean also chasing after them. And then we have what is Flapjack currently running in P12 and not really around anyone. He's having to give the space to our leaders here, who are chasing one another around, with Plux only 9/10 still ahead of Jack. As they come out of 9 and into 10. And what you can see in terms of Plux right now, he's having to work that car so hard. And I think Jack is now starting to use that additional fuel just to apply a little bit of pressure, incremental pressure to Plux. But further down the field, of course, we want to keep an eye on all of our drivers where possible. We can see that Berkey has cleared Rice, and he really has cleared him to the point now where Gadget is the next in the line to take a shot at Rice's pole of 7th place. Now Rice, of course, is on a little bit of a different strategy, and those tyres, those soft tyres are heavily worn. I get the feeling he's going to be pitting probably at the end of this lap, if not the next one. And Gadget will have another pit stop. He's definitely got to have a pit stop to get the fuel in the car. And Senna, meanwhile, will have to take a pit stop in order to get some fuel in the car, plus also one more set of tyres, we reckon. So it's going to be close between this group, and really it's up for debate who is going to finish in what will be P6 at the end of the day. Well, not P6, sorry, P7 at the moment. You never know where Berkey Baby could fit into it, and one mistake from Berkey Baby could see him drop into the clutches of this battle. Now, further up the field, we can see that Plux right at the front is being caught now by Jack, and I think this is where Jack is starting to build the pressure. It's towards the end of each stint that Jack starts to build the pressure and apply it and try to force Plux into a mistake. But I think Jack has in fact made a mistake here in the fact that the gap's gone from 5/10 back out to 9/10 over the course of the run up the hill into a 6, 7 and then 8. And Jaggernaut chasing after Bottlejob. Remember, that gap is going to increase because of the soft tyres Jaggernaut is running compared to the super softs that are being run by Bottlejob. As Jaggernaut goes wide then picks up a half-second penalty and will also penalise himself on time. Half-second there just by simply running off, and then the half-second penalty on top. That's going to be frustrating for the Frenchman. Muller CJ haven't been clear of everyone right now. Berkey really being ahead, as we can see that Rice has pitted, and that releases Gadget, and now he's got to contend. Gadget's got to contend with Senna, who's going to be charging after him. But I think that the NSX has just got the legs down the straight into 4 here to be able to hold off. But Gadget, of course, will be conscious of the fact that he's going to be feeling pressure from 2 drivers simultaneously, and he does need to be careful of this, because if he starts getting into a side-by-side fight with Senna, who is closing at an astronomical rate here as they come up into 8, and Sean, I think, is looking for a move to the inside. Now, will Sean go for it? No, he's just poking his nose into the rear, the right-hand view mirror, or Senna sort of saying, hello, I'm here, keep an eye on me, rather than the guy in front. Give me the place, and I'll chase after Gadget for you, please. I think Senna's more motivated on focusing on what's ahead of him rather than what's behind of him, and I think all 3 of these guys really are in a tooth and nail battle for P7 all the way to the finale now, with 11 minutes to go. And I don't think any one of them is going to want to give up the place with this time. As you can see, Senna goes wide and Sean almost manages to get a little bit alongside initially. But I think Senna just managed to keep it under control there to the point that Sean had to back out a tiny bit, curbing his momentum initially. And you can see the momentum loss as I think Gadget comes into the pits for what will be his final stop. Now, he will have the advantage, Gadget. And also with Sean fighting with Senna here. Now, this is something these two cannot afford to do because the fighting will mean that they're going to cost each other time. And assuming they've got one more pit stop to go, that is going to give Gadget, so long as he doesn't make a mistake on his outlaps, that's going to give Gadget the authority to take P7 back immediately. Now, they've got to be wary of this, and G-Rabbit comes out behind them. Of course, G-Rabbit running a lap down from these guys, but still staying in the fight, which is always great to see. But Sean here has got to be conscious as our leaders come in. Now, this is important for the race lead because Plux is on 0% fuel, Jack is on 5% fuel. Plux will have to take additional fuel in at this point. Now, how will it play out? And we can see that Plux has come out. In fact, he's taken on less fuel than Jack. Now, you've got to wonder whether Plux has got a fuel-saving strategy lined up because he's only got 23% fuel compared to Jack's 31%. But Jack might be putting on extra fuel in order to be able to go full helter-skelter in terms of pace here and charge after the NSX driver for the lead. It's 10 minutes to go, ladies and gentlemen. And now between these two, of it being a 1.7 second gap currently, we know Jack can close that gap down rapidly. But it's when he gets into that dirty air that the big question will be asked of him. Can he pick up the win today, or will it go to Plux? And will we finally see a repeat winner? We will if either of them come across the line in the lead. We'll see our first repeat winner of this season of Tier 1. Now, further down the field at this point with all the pit stops ongoing, do keep in mind that Muller CJ has just taken a pit stop. Now, this is important for Muller in the fact that he's just coming out of the pits now. And remember, his main rival in the battle for P5 is Berkey Baby. Now, watch Berkey Baby here. Watch to what will be the right-hand side of your screen. And I think you can see Muller has just come out behind Berkey Baby. And I think Berkey has pulled a bit of a blinder here in terms of the fact that whilst he didn't have the best set of mid-stints, he's still been able to come out ahead of Muller by approximately 2.5 seconds. And that means Muller now has got it all to play for in terms of chasing down the GTR driver in his Lexus for a potential P5 and being in that top 5, which I think Muller would crave, but Berkey even more so. I think he really wants a great result and he's worked hard for it, but will he be able to hold on with 9 minutes to go? Further down the field, we can see that Rice, who is running on the soft at the moment, having pitted, is ahead of Gadget right now. But remember, we did say as part of all the pit stop sequence that Gadget would come out in front of Mr. Sean and Senna by simply pitting one lap earlier and Sean and Senna fighting, and that has materialised with a 2.5 second gap between Gadget and Sean, and then Senna immediately behind. What are these two fighting tooth and nail for P9 right now? And then all the way down the back at this point, pitting, we can see it is Flapjack 247 taking on another set of tyres. I'm sure his team are happy at the number of tyres he's using in this race. And we could also see that G-Rabbit is still in the race, albeit a lap down on a good number of drives right now. But credit where it's due to the Finnish driver, again, staying in there and keeping up the fight and keeping up the pace. Now, looking further up the field, once again, we can see that really the gap between P3 and P1 is not going to close down at any point. It's 13 seconds to P1 from Sir Bottlejob. But again, Bottlejob, I think, right now will be thinking to himself, you know what? This doesn't matter. I'm pleased with what I've been able to do. I'm just simply going to focus on bringing the car home. As Jagannat has pitted and gone to a set of super softs. So really, this is going to put the lock and key, if you will, on Bottlejob. He will pit and take on some fuel. He's going to have to pit very soon, and I suspect that this will enable Bottlejob to come out ahead of Jagannat because it is a 21 second gap at the moment, and the pit loss time will not be great enough for Jagannat to leave him initially. But he does have to keep in mind, of course, that Jagannat will be poised to try and take that place should he make a single mistake. And if I was a betting man, I'd say that Bottlejob will be pitting within the next 2 laps. And in fact, Speaker Devil, he pits on this lap. And there we go. So Bottlejob coming in. And as he will keep an eye on that, of course, Berkey Baby right now. Just Muller's, in fact, closing up to Berkey Baby at this point. So we could have a battle for P5 very soon. And we did say that Berkey was the... In fact, he goes wide there out of turn 11 into 12. That is going to compromise the line massively. And he's got to be careful on getting on the power too soon coming out of 12 because of the dirty tyres of running wide out of 11. And you can see that Muller is all over the back of him here as they come charging through to complete the lap, coming through turn 15. And Berkey is into the pits. Goodness me, coming off of that set of tyres, and he just doesn't feel as though he can perhaps go all the way to the end with 7 minutes remaining, and that releases Muller CJ into P5. And I think Muller here is going to be chuckling to himself because really he's pulled a masterclass in terms of strategy, and he's been the victor of the midfield battle because now that's going to give him at least 8 seconds over what will be the returning Berkey Baby as they come down through here. But Berkey Baby return now is coming along. Unfortunately for him, it's only a back marker that he has to worry about. You can see that G-Rabbit's already getting out of the way because Berkey's going to want to charge after Muller here. But I think Muller's going to have the longevity in his tyres to go to the end. But what a masterclass from Muller in terms of strategy there. Congratulations, Tatman. Now he's just got to bring it home, of course. Meanwhile, Gadget is on a charge, chasing after DJ Rice for P7. With there being approximately 3 to 4 laps to go, you have to wonder whether Gadget thinks he's got some in the tank in order to secure that position, and you can see that gap is closing down already. And behind him, Senna and Sean are continuing to fight. And this is going to be important for the pair of them because they'll both want a top 10 position, but one of them will want that P9 more than the other. And I think Sean here is getting closer and closer. Senna is feeling that pressure lap after lap. But to be fair to Senna, he's able to hold his own. He's just drifting a lot in that Lexus. And I think so long as he doesn't make a mistake, he'll be able to put up a very strong defence as Sean is all over the back of the fellow British driver. The two Brits going tooth and nail to the end, hammer and tongs all the way. And with only 5 minutes to go as they come into turn 12, you do have to feel for the fact that Sean here will really want to get past, and really Senna has been the bane of his existence throughout the entirety of this race, particularly the second half in terms of trying to gain positions. And Senna has been really a thorn in everyone's side in the fact that he's just been there at the most inconvenient times, and credit to Senna for doing so, of course. He's just been that driver who's been able to hold everybody up, and Senna in return has pulled out a 1 second gap, but you do think that Sean's perhaps going to come back within the next lap or so. In fact, he's already closing that gap going through sector 1. Now our leaders, meanwhile, the gap is 8 tenths once again, so we can see that Jack is back into that slipstream zone. The fastest lap at the moment being held by Jack at 1:22.7, and I think Jack here is the guy with the momentum. I don't think that fastest lap is going to change in the closing laps here, and really now it's down to who is going to cross that line as our race winner. We will keep an eye on these two, of course, as they close up. Bottle Job, as we predicted, has managed to accrete a 10.5 second gap over Jaganat through the pit stops here, so I think Bottle Job just needs to bring it home, as does Jaganat. And meanwhile, Muller CJ, whilst Berkey is chasing after him, that gap is not closing rapidly enough at this point. Meanwhile, looking at Rice, Gadget is now almost within the 8th 10th slipstream zone, and further down we can see that Senna is still being hounded by Sean, and then Flapjack is a considerable distance down the field, unfortunately for him, as we do have one driver going very sideways here, in fact, and oh goodness me, Jack has lost it. Now, based on the fact we did see a driver seemingly going wide, I get the feeling that that was potentially coming out of 4 into 5. Jack just simply has got it wrong and gone a bit sideways, and he's probably going to be kicking himself. And meanwhile, Plux is probably going to be jumping up and down inside and thinking, right, just don't make the same mistake as the fastest driver on track. But to be fair, that is so unfortunate for Jack. That's what held him off from making the challenge in race number 1, was the fact he made a mistake early on in the race, which gave Plux the space in order to pull out the strategy. And you can see, oh goodness me, careful Jack, you've got to cool it down there. Just get the car home. He's picked up damage, so he's hit a wall somewhere. I get the thing, that was definitely coming out of turn 4. Unfortunately, we can't see the replay for it, but that is so unfortunate for the young driver, the young British driver who has been literally hounding Plux the Duck all the way through. He's going to have to bring that car home, and Bottle Job only being 10 seconds down the road. Could we see Bottle Job get a P2 here? Because Jack is going to have to hit that car because of the damage it's got, and Jack is in. Now, where will these two come out? We'll find out very shortly for you, but it could all switcheroo at this point. Meanwhile, looking further down the field, we can see Gadget is actually past Rice there. We missed that off camera. Our apologies, ladies and gentlemen, because of what was happening. But Gadget is up into P7. He's got the pass on Rice. And Senna, meanwhile, is still being handled by Sean. And meanwhile, coming out of the pits right now, you can see that Bottle Job is not going to jump ahead of Jack. In fact, hold on a second. Jack is back out in P2, and the gap between them is going to be about 4 seconds. So I think Jack here has just got to focus on getting the lap in order to secure that P2. That is unfortunate for Bottle. A bit of a glimmer of hope there, perhaps, for the British driver, but not today. And Flapjack down the bottom of the field right now. We're just checking around, and it seems as though G-Rabbit's in the pits there. Plux the Duck really just being able to saunter off into the distance at this point. But looking further down the field again, we can see that Gadget is running away. And meanwhile, we've still got the battle for P9 to go. And you could see that Senna was taking that defensive initial line into turn 1. But with Sean not really putting up a fight this time to try and make the move, I think Sean is waiting to the final lap. He wants the tyre wear on his opponent's car to be at maximum and really go for it on the final lap. So I think this is going to be the closest battle we are going to see out on circuit until the conclusion. Oh, look who is pitting. And I get the feeling that somebody is going to take on a tiny bit of fuel and go full pelt. Yet he's putting 2% fuel. You know what Plux the Duck is going to try and do over the coming laps, and that is go for that fastest lap. He will have enough time to get the car around in order to do one more lap. And now the question is, can he do it, of course? as he comes back out into lead. And Senna here is being hounded all over the back by Mr. Sean. And Sean here, he just cannot find a way past his fellow Brit. And Senna here is doing a fantastic job of holding on for dear life. And those tyres must be abused in that Lexus. And meanwhile, Sean's tyres by comparison are so fresh that you think they've just come off the assembly line. And Senna right now is thinking, come on, just one more lap. I don't need to do much more. There's just one more lap. And credit to Senna, a fantastic driver. He's been my teammate in other series before. And Senna knows how to position the car, but will he be able to pull it off for one more lap as he's chasing after Rice? And Rice here isn't too far ahead in terms of only a second up the road. If he can close the gap to Rice, he'll have the slipstream for one final lap. We'll have to wait and find out. And again, these are the closest guys out on circuit as we flick through. Muller picking up a penalty there, but I don't think that's going to cost him anything. Yep, and these are the closest guys out on track at the moment as they're coming around. And I think we're going to see these guys be the first. So the chase for P7, if you will, I think will be the first group to one of the first groups to complete the race on lap 42 with 30 seconds remaining. But we will keep an eye on our telemetry boards and our timing boards, as Sean is still trying to chase, but I just don't think Sean's got it in him anymore. I think the momentum has dwindled away, and I think Sean now is settling for P10, but you never know. Perhaps and in fact, you can see he's closing up again, so I'll bite my words back, as Sean is just simply biding his time to go for the move. But the first of our drivers then to cross what will be the start-finish line to complete their race it'll be Flapjack, who finishes the race in P11, followed closely by Jaganat in P4. Then we've got Muller CJ coming around to complete his race on lap 42 in P5. And then we have got Berkey Baby, probably feeling a little bit peeved at the fact he couldn't get past Muller CJ today, coming home in P6, but good drive by him. And then we have got Gadget, who will feel very accomplished, I reckon, in the fact that he was able to get the P7. We can see that Sean, by the way, has got past Ayrton Senna. And then we've got Rice coming home in P8, followed by Sean in 9th. Now, was there some contact? It looks as though something tragic has happened here in the fact that we have got, oh goodness me, Senna I think has got it wrong somewhere in the fact that he's got severe engine damage. So perhaps there was a mistake going through to complete his race, if you will. So that would explain why Senna is literally crawling across the line. And it looks like G-Rabbit is going to finish behind him in P12. And then coming home to win the race, your race winner plucks the duck in P1 in the Honda NSX. And in second position, probably feeling the greed, he put the pressure on the duck all the way through, but wasn't able to just complete the challenge today, but should take credit in nonetheless. P2 goes to Zefix's Jack in the GTR. And then P3 goes to Bottle Job. And that is your race results. Congratulations to all of our drivers, but to Plucks the Duck for the race win. What an absolute cracker of a race. And to be honest, it was hard to call. Up and down the field, it was hard to call all the way through for a number of positions. Goodness me. And I think right now, as probably Zefix's Jack is reading this right now, or listening to this, he's probably thinking to himself right now that he screwed himself over. But the thing is, to mount such a challenge for so long, one of the drivers there had to make a mistake at some point, or something was going to happen. And this time it was the challenger, the contender, that made the mistake. But you never know in the future. I think we are going to be heading into a cracker of a second half of a season. And as for Bottle Job, well, we saw that he had a tough start to the season, but it's a redemption story today.
And with that, that's all we've got time for today. If you have enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and or subscribe to both my channel and also the official Drivers Room YouTube channel, as may be found in the description of this video. But until next time, I've been your host TX141, or Britain a Spit, and remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, stay on track.